اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. خل المقادير تمضي لا تغالبها، فإن من غالب الأقدار مغلوب. إن القضاء لسيف لا يقاومه شيء من الخلق إلا وهو محبوب. وامشي رويدا مع الأقدار في مهل، فإن من يكره الأقدار متعوب. سلم وفوض لحكم الله محتسبا، فإنما الأمر مقضي ومكتوب. والله يقضي بما شاء وكيف يشاء، والعبد عبد ومخلوق ومربوب. ولم يزل ربه الرحمن يكلأه، باللطف والحفظ محفوف ومصحوب. حسن ظنونك بالرب الكريم، ولا تسيء ظنا فتبقى عنه محجوب. واعمل لنفسك أعمالا تسر بها، فكل ما يفعل الإنسان محسوب. إن كان خيرا فخير سوف يحصده، أو كان شرا فتنكيل وتعذيب. يا ويل من ضيع الأعمار في زلل، وكل من كسبه الآثام والحوب. واطلب علوما مع إقبال مع عمل، فأنت بالعلم والأعمال مطلوب. واحذر زمانك هذا إنه زمن، به المناكير شاعت والمعايب. فكن وحيدا فريدا خاملا حذرا، فإن فيه الأقاويل الأكاذيب. والظلم فاش بلا لوم ولا نكر، وللمساكين تخويف وترهيب. فكن لبيتك حلسا لا تفارقه، إلا لشيء له في الشرع تصويب. واذكر إلهك ذكرا دائما أبدا، فالذكر بالذكر مقرون ومصحوب. وذاكر الله يجالسه، فاجلس مع الله تأتيك المواهب. واطلب من الله ما تحتاج أجمعه، فالخير يا ذا لديه والمطالب. لا تسأل الله كريم الوجه خالقنا، فعنده الفضل والإحسان مسكوب. واعكف على بابه في كل ما نفس، فإن نسيانه يا صاحبي حوب. وكن أخي بحبل الله معتصما، فكل حبل سواه فهو مقطوب. واسلك على سنة الهادي تفوز، وفي أولاك ترضى وفي أخراك محبوب. ففي اتباع النبي الخير أجمعه، عليه منا صلاة ربي يدوب. تغشاه والآل والأصحاب أجمعهم، ومن لمذهبهم في الخير منسوب. والحمد لله رب العالمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, my dear respected viewers, We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue in the book of Nur Idah by Al-Imam Hasan Shugun Bulali in Fiqh of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our lesson, make it a reason our sins are forgiven, prayers are answered inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless us with iman and taqwa, ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah, we straight away enter into the book. In our last lesson we were speaking about the types of wudu in terms of its ruling. So the author mentioned there are three. One is fard, and then we have wajib and mandub. Fard, wajib, mandub, and we have mentioned all these situations where the author speaks about the rulings whether wudu is obligatory or wajib or mandub. So now inshallah ta'ala we go on to the next chapter where he mentioned faslun fi nawaqidil wudu. So this is one of the important chapters in the wudu that speaks about the things that nullify the ablution. So in the Hanafi madhab, as what we can see, it is extensively mentioned on this in this chapter where the author mentioned ينقض الوضوء اثنا شيئا. The things that makes wudu invalidated, there are 12 things. اثنا. So this is again those who have studied the fiqh of Imam Shafi'i. The things that nullifies wudu in the madhab of Shafi'i, and it's only 4. But here in the Hanafi madhab, it is mentioned there are 12. Although certain things that are mentioned here can be combined into one principle. That's what we will see later. But certainly it is more extensive than what we have studied in fiqh Shafi'i. So let us enter into these 12 things. The 12 things that makes wudu nullify. Number 1, ma kharaja min as-sabilain. This is the same thing that we mentioned in fiqh Shafi'i. Anything that comes out from as-sabilain. As-sabilain is the qubul and dubur. It is the front and the back private parts. The front and the back private parts, of both the male and female. So anything that comes out of the private parts nullify wudu. So ma here, this is lil umum. Then it is in the universal, and it takes universal meaning. So anything, whether it is najis or non-najis, anything that comes out from the sabilain, whether it is something that usually comes out or unusually comes out. For example, some of the fuqaha mention if a person swallow metal, and then after that the metal came out from his private part, it nullifies wudu, although metal is pure. But the fact that it comes out from the private parts, it makes the ablution invalidated. So here anything that comes out from the private parts invalidates the wudu. But there is an exception, he mentioned illa rihal qubul, except that air that comes out from the front private part, whether from the female or from the male. So this is based on the prevailing judgment in madhab Hanafi that it does not nullify the ablution. And this is important, and especially for women who are facing difficulty in in controlling the air that comes out from the front private part, that is from the vagina, for example, because this usually some women have some of these issues, pertaining to men. It is almost unlikely that it can come out from the penis, but when it comes into the vagina, it is a different issue. And one of the arguments of the Hanafi scholars that they mentioned that this does not nullify the wudu, for the fact that usually the air that appears to come out from the frontal private part, it is just at the surface. It is just at the surface of the air that is present. So it is not anymore from the internal aspect. But even in this opinion, if it comes from the internal aspect, this is excuse. This is something that is not the norm. So in the Hanafi and madhab, it carries a later ruling. When it comes to the Shafi'i and madhab, of course, we know we do not make such differentiation. Anything that comes out from the private parts invalidates the ablution. But here this is a way out for those who are having difficulty, and yes, what I mentioned. So this is point number 1. Number 2, ونجاسة سائلة من غيرهما كدم وقيح. The thing that nullifies ablution is a filth that is flowing. Min غيرهما. Hima goes back to qubul and dubur. Meaning if there is najis there is any a filth that flows out any from the body other than the anus and the frontal any private part, yani the private parts any basically, this any makes any the ablution invalidated. So the author any gives an example, kadam waqih. For example, any a person is bleeding. A person any is bleeding. For example, any the arm any is bleeding. The arm is bleeding and the blood flows. The blood flows. So that is why the author mentions sa'ila najasatun. Blood any is najis. Blood is a filth. Sa'ila and it is flowing. If the blood any that comes out any from the body of a person and it is flowing, and this is other than anything that comes out any from the private parts, now this makes any the wudu invalidated. This makes the wudu invalidated. But any if the blood does not flow, meaning a person any has a cut but the blood any does not flow, this does not invalidate the wudu. Likewise, any qayh any is the pulse any from injury. If the pulse any flows just like any blood, because all these things are najis. All these things are najis. So the opposite of najis are pure things. Pure things any like what you call it, our tears. Our tears any is pure. It does not make wudu invalidated. Likewise, our sweat. Our sweat is also something any that comes out from our body and that is sa'ila, that is flowing, but it is not a filth. So it does not any makes wudu invalidated. So the point here that the author is speaking any about any point number one, any it must be a filth. Point number two, that it is flowing, not any at its place. If the filth, if the filth like pulse or blood does not flow, then it does not any invalidate the ablution. So this is point number two. Number three, وينقضه ولادة من غير رؤية دم. Number three, any if a woman delivers any a child, a woman any delivers any a child after pregnancy, give birth any to a child. So the giving birth any of a child invalidates any the wudu, although there is no blood, although nothing any from filth or postnatal bleeding that comes out any from the private part. So imagine any a child, any an infant, a baby that is born without any postnatal bleeding, Does this any invalidate any the wudu? Yes, this any invalidates any the wudu, because this comes any under the principle that something comes out any from the private part, and a child any is part any of something. A child and is part any of something, so it invalidates any the wudu even though there is no postnatal bleeding. What more any if there is any postnatal bleeding, the wudu it becomes invalidated. Point number four, وقيح طعام, yani if a person vomits. So in the Hanafi madhab, and we need to pay attention to this. In the Hanafi and madhab, vomiting invalidates the ablution, but there is a condition. What kind of vomit any that makes wudu any invalidated? If it is overwhelming any in a sense that you cannot control it with your mouth, that if you were to collate any the vomit any without flowing, you are unable to do so, meaning it will burst, and it will still come out any from your mouth. In this situation, the wudu becomes invalidated. But if it is slight vomit in a sense that you can control any with your mouth, it does not invalidate the wudu. So either vomiting any of vomiting of food, ta'am, this is what the author mentioned, qayh ta'am, aw ma, or water that you have drunk, and then after that it comes out any again. This also invalidates any wudu if it is overwhelming. Wa alaq any is a kind any of a blood any that is black any in color. Aw miratin, this is part any of something any that has that comes out any from the body. Either mala al-fam any meaning it fills up any the mouth, meaning you cannot control it any from not any coming out, then it becomes any invalidated. Wa huwa ma la yutbiqu alayhi al-famu illa bitakalluf, except that you need to really takalluf yani meaning you put in the pressure, then it doesn't come out. Now in this situation, the wudu any becomes any invalidated, because it can any come out any if you do not any put in any the pressure as such. Alal asah, and this is based any on the prevailing any judgment any in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, as mentioned by the author here. So vomiting in the Hanafi madhab invalidates wudu with the condition that this vomit any is overwhelming. As far as the vomiting any is a minor vomit where it does not any cover the whole mouth, it does not any invalidate the wudu. So when it comes into vomiting, and we have to look any at these aspects. Then he mentioned وَيُجْمَعُ مُتَفَرِقُ الْقَيْءِ إِذَا اتَّحَزَ سَبَبُهُ, and this is the opinion of Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani. And for those who are following any this class, put a note there. This is the opinion of Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani in the opposition any of the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa. What he mentioned, he said that if a person vomits, but he vomits a bit, a bit, this is mutafarraq, a bit, it is not any one go. But if you were to collate the vomit, it can be overwhelming, in a sense covers in the whole mouth. Then according to this opinion, the vomiting invalidates any the wudu if the vomit any is from the same cause. Yani is from the same cause, meaning he vomits any just 5 minutes any ago. He vomits any just 5 minutes ago. So within any this 5 minutes there is a series any of vomits. So it is a minor vomit for each time, but it is the same cause that he is vomiting any in the same any sitting. So in this any situation, if you to collate any the vomit, it can be overwhelming in such that it covers any the mouth, and you have to put in pressure any to prevent any the vomit from coming out of the mouth. This also invalidates the ablution. And as I mentioned, this is the opinion of Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani in opposition to the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, and the author any mentioned any the opinion of Imam Muhammad any in Nur Idah. Number 5, wadamun ghalaba ala al-buzaqi aw sawahu. This is any pertaining any to blood, any that comes out, that is a lot. How any do we know any it is a lot? So he gave an example if it is more than the saliva. So for example, any if a person is bleeding any in the mouth, a person any is bleeding any in the mouth. So the blood any that comes out any from the mouth, if you were to look any at the amount any of blood, any amount of saliva, if the amount any of the blood supersede any the amount of saliva, the wudu becomes invalidated. Or it is the same, aw sawahu. The author any mentioned, or 50% any blood, 50% any saliva. So in this any situation, the wudu any becomes any invalidated. But if the blood any is slight, in a sense, then if you look any at the saliva, you cannot see the traces of blood, or maybe you can see any just a bit of the traces of blood. Now this we say the saliva any is more than the blood. So in this any situation, it does not invalidate the wudu. The same thing any from the case any of nose bleeding. If the bleeding any is minimal, it does not any invalidate any the wudu. But if the bleeding any is a lot, and it invalidates any the wudu. Number 6, wa naumun lam tatamakkan fihi al-maq'adatu min al-ard. This is any pertaining any to sleeping. Sleeping invalidates any ablution, but with the condition that the back any of the person, and is not firm any on the ground. This also in the Shafi madhab also we speak any about this. So there are similarities any between us any and the Hanafis. When a person any is sleeping, if the back any is firm on the ground, what is the meaning any back is firm on the ground? Meaning no air any can come out. And if a person is sitting down and he causes any pressure on his anus any, for example, the air any cannot come out. We say this is mutamakkinun alal ard. Mutamakkin, that means that it is firm in a way that if he is sleeping also, there is no chance any air can come out. But if a person is laying down flat any on his back, then the wudu any becomes invalidated even in his sleeps any for a moment, because there is a possibility that air can come out, regardless whether the air really came out or does not. But because of the possibility of the air that can come out when a person in such a situation, the wudu any becomes invalidated, unless any if mutamakkin, that's what we mentioned, that if the body of a person any is firm any on the ground, then the wudu any will not be invalidated. So this point number 6. Number 7, he mentioned wartifa'u maq'adati na'imin qabla intibahihi wa illam yasqut. Yani a person any is sleeping, and then before any he wakes up any from the sleep, he changed any the position of his sitting in a way that it is not firm any on the ground. So the author any mentioned qabla intibahi, before he wakes up any from the sleep. If that happens, then the wudu becomes invalidated, even though the position any the position himself is such that he does not fall from it. Wa illam lam yasqut. So for example, yani if I am sitting down like this, my back is firm on the ground. But if I do like this, if I sleep and I do like this, yani my back now is exposed. So there is a possibility that air can come out, yani from my private parts. So in this any situation, my wudu any becomes any invalidated, even though my inclination like this does not make me fall on the ground. But because any it is enough for the private part to be exposed, then the wudu any becomes invalidated. This is what the author any mentioned. وَارْتِفَاءُ مَقْعَدَةِ نَائِمٍ قَبْلَ انْتِبَاهِ وَإِلَّمْ يَسْقُطْ فِي الظَّاهِرِ. And this is any the opinion any in the madhab as what in the ta'liq and he mentioned, wa'tamada fi dur al-mukhtar annahu la yanqud. There is differences in the madhab. The author of dur al-mukhtar and he mentioned that it does not nullify the ablution, but according to the prevailing judgment in the madhab of Hanafi, that it invalidates the wudu because of the possibility. So it is important for us to understand this, because of the possibility of air to come out from the private part. That is why it invalidates the wudu. But what happens if ba'da intiba, for example, if a person, for example, after he woke up from his sleep, he changed the position. Now, this does not invalidate wudu. Based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-aynan wika usah. The Prophet he mentioned the eyes is the seal of the anus. Meaning, as long as a person is awake, he knows what comes out from his anus. So this does not invalidate the wudu. Number 8, irma. Any person is fainting. Fainting invalidates wudu because a person does not know, that is not conscious of himself. So if there is a possibility of air coming out, he will not feel it. Likewise, when a person in a state of insanity. Insanity also loss of consciousness. The same ruling as loss of consciousness. Likewise, drunkenness, sukr. When a person is drunk in the sense that he is lost in his consciousness, then this invalidates wudu. But if a person is not drunk and he just by drinking liquor does not invalidate the wudu. Just by drinking liquor does not invalidate the wudu. What invalidates the wudu? If a person come into a state of drunkenness, in a sense that he lost his consciousness. So fainting, becoming insane, drunkard, becoming drunk and sleeping, all these things invalidates wudu, because of the possibility that this person lost their consciousness, and the possibility of them doing things that invalidates the wudu without them realizing, because their mind is not functioning. So that is why it invalidates the wudu. And then number 11, and this is important for us to take note, in the Hanafi madhab, laughing laughing a lot in prayers makes wudu invalid. Laughing a lot in prayers. So this is a thing we have to pay attention. There's a difference between laughing aloud in prayers and outside prayers. What invalidates ablution? If a person laughs aloud in prayers. This invalidates ablution. So when if it invalidates ablution, it invalidates the prayer. So the ablution is invalidated, then the person has to take wudu again. طيب, what is the meaning of qahqaha? Here the author mentioned وَقَهْقَهَةُ مُصَلٍّ بَالِغٍ. A person must be baligh, not sabi. Not a person, a child that has not reached puberty, but he is baligh. And qahqaha is, the definition of qahqaha is laughing where people around you can hear your voice. So for example, if I'm laughing and people around me can hear my voice, this is qahqaha. So it is not necessary to be very loud, but loudness in a sense that people around you can hear your laughter. But if you laugh in a way that only you can hear yourself, this does not invalidate the ablution in prayers, but your prayer becomes invalidated, because words come out from your mouth that invalidates the prayer. But your wudu does not invalidate it if you are not laughing aloud in the sense that people around you can hear your laughter. And this is in prayers, that's what I mentioned. That is why the author mentioned qahqahatu musallin, yani a musalli, a person who's doing any prayer, laughs in prayer loudly, in a sense people around him and he hears him, and he must be baligh and not sabi. That's what we mentioned, reach puberty. Yaqadan fi salatin zati ruku'in wa sujudin, yani in a way that he knows what you call it, he's conscious of himself, and he is in a prayer that has ruku and sujud. Why the author mentioned ruku and sujud? Because when it comes to janaza prayers and sujud tilawah, this does not invalidate the what you call it, this does not invalidate the janaza prayers, and also the sujud tilawah. Walau ta'ammad al-khuruj biha min as-salah, even though he makes the intention and he doesn't want to continue praying, the wudu becomes invalidated. طيب, and then number 12, and he mentioned وَمَسُّ فَرْجٍ بِذَكَرٍ مُنْتَصِبٍ بِلَا حَائِلٍ. طيب, this is interesting in the Hanafi madhab. Hanafi madhab, and they mentioned that touching any man and woman without mahram does not invalidate wudu. That's why you don't see any within any this 12 that speaks any about touching any skin to skin between a man and a woman non-mahram. Because in the Hanafi madhab, regardless whether the shahwa, no shahwa, if you touch the body any of your wife, for example, it does not any invalidate wudu. But there is one situation that invalidates the wudu that we have to pay attention. If the penis of someone, for example, a husband, which is halal, husband and wife, halal relationship, the penis of a husband touches the vagina or the private parts basically of the wife. The penis of a husband that is hard. The penis of the husband that is hard. This is the meaning of muntasab. Muntasab, when it is hard, and the penis that is hard. Meaning there is arousal, there is sexual arousal. And if it touches the private part, like the vagina for example, bila ha'ilin, without any barrier, meaning skin to skin, this invalidates the wudu. And again, this is the opinion of Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani. Naam. So now when we have reached the end of what you call it, this chapter of the things that nullify in wudu, inshallah, in our next lesson we are going to speak about the things that does not nullify the ablution. This is what the author mentioned. Faslun fima la yunqidul wudu. The author wants us to have a deeper understanding and to differentiate what are the things that invalidate any wudu and what are the things that does not invalidate the wudu. Wallahu a'lam bis-shawab. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.